Let's take a look at characteristics of organizational change. When we talk about organizational change, we're referring to many different kinds of changes that occur at many levels. Changes can occur at the individual level when people learn new skills or develop new ways of working through mentoring, coaching, or education and training. Changes can occur at the group or team level as teams develop new ways of working with one another, define their goals and objectives, and learn ways of addressing conflict. Changes occur at the organizational level through the development of new strategies and processes, visions for a new desired future, and major system practices that affect all organization members. Practitioners and scholars have noticed that organizational changes differ on a number of dimensions. Changes vary in several ways. Organizational change can be planned, often due to environmental factors, strategic or market needs, and other influences. Changes can also be unplanned, perhaps in response to an immediate threat or crisis. OD literature differentiates between first-order, incremental modifications that make sense within an established framework and second-order change that is transformational modification in the framework itself. Implementation of a computer system that simply automates existing work practices is an example of first-order change. First-order change reflects an evolution of existing definitions rather than a revolution or redefinition. Episodic change is a distinct period of change, usually infrequent and explicitly defined. When seen in this way, episodic change is framed as a response to a stable condition in which adverse conditions are present that force a change. Continuous change, on the other hand, reflects the idea that an organization is never truly out of a state of change. Scholars and practitioners have developed a number of models to explain how change occurs. Some of these models are based on years of empirical research, whereas others are based in practitioners' experience of witnessing and implementing change in organizations. These models explain change differently based on theoretical assumptions about organizations, people, and work. The first lens that we use to look at an organization is as a system. Systems theory is about the systematic interconnections of the natural world and the underlying laws that define their interconnection. Rather than investigate only the subparts of these organisms in isolation from one another, general systems theory tried to understand how the subparts related to one another. Open systems thinking is the process of considering how people, processes, structures, and policies all exist in an interconnected web of relationship. Systems thinker see the wholes of an organism or organization as larger than the sum of its parts, and as systems that exist within other systems which they are a part. Correcting organizational problems requires systems thinking rather than simple linear thinking in order to solve the root of the problem rather than connecting to the immediate surface level symptoms of the problem. Systems theory has been a popular approach in organizational studies because it resonates with how we understand organizations to work at the most general level. Organizations produce something, whether it's a product, such as cars or a breakfast cereal, or a service, such as financial consulting or providing internet access. Changes in the environment, such as regulatory changes, cause organizations to adapt. Aspects of the system are interdependent on one another, and problems of one part of the system create problems in other parts. These statements provide a common sense explanation of how organizations and their subsystems seem to work. For OD practitioners, systems theory offers a number of benefits. First, it can offer useful explanation for human behavior. Instead of seeing individual differences, OD practitioners can note where systems may encourage certain behavior patterns, usually subtly or without conscious decision. If a call center regularly measures the number of calls completed per hour, then call takers may be motivated to quickly complete calls at the expense of careful diagnosis and resolution of customer problems. Second, understanding the system and its dynamics gives OD practitioners a more appropriate place to begin interventions for change, since the object of change is often the best directed at the system's level. For example, inadequately maintained or broken equipment can reduce factory output. Instead of blaming the production manager's poor management skills for low production yields, the systematic issue is a more direct cause. OD practitioners can be more deliberate about changes that are being proposed, and possible negative results can be predicted. A second view of organizations is a more recent evolution in organizational theory. Organizations are frequently personified. We speak of organizations adapting to their environment, or the production department deciding to increase output. Classical organizational theory actually considered organizations to be living things with a concrete social environment, a formal structure, recognized goals, and a variety of needs. Yet organizations are not people, and a number of important ideas are obscured when we personify them. Some scholars suggest that the study of organizations is really the study of the process of organizing, with the verb form emphasizing the active role we take in creating our organizations. The view of organizations as socially constructed challenges the prevailing assumptions of systems theory that organization environments are self-evident concepts and categories with predefined singular meanings on which we all agree. Instead, we see those concepts and categories as created, developed, and infused with meaning by organizational members. Interactions in language are important areas of attention in the social construction perspective because it's through our regular interaction with dialogue that organizations are developed and change can occur. The social construction perspective has become an attractive one for both researchers and practitioners because it resonates with what we experience in organizations as we make sense of our activities and the actions of others. Decisions are considered and rationalized based on complex and contradictory facts. The social construction perspective fills in the missing elements of systems theory to provide a richer and more dynamic view of how organizations work. It describes how members experience organizations as social environments. The social construction perspective offers several distinct benefits. Like systems theory, it offers a useful explanation for human behavior. It helps to articulate the complexities in collecting, interpreting, and sharing the information used to make and communicate decisions in organizations. It also emphasizes the role that members take in creating the organization. While an individual may not have the choice to change in a certain policy, the policy is developed by organization members and created for the organization's benefit. The social construction perspective illustrates the active choice that we make in creating these systems and relationships. This implies that OD practitioners should create situations in which people can choose a different organization to create, such as new policies, processes, roles, and relationships. The social construction perspective helps OD practitioners to see the importance of communication in creating change. Finally, it stresses that organizational change has its foundation a change in meaning. Simply changing a practice, a role, a title, or a department name does not always change the underlying interpretive process. Change can be best accomplished when members have the opportunity to work together to define new practices. Organizational change, consistent with social construction perspective, recognizes that change is unpredictable. Instead of locating organizational change in categories such as leadership, strategy, or rewards, the social construction perspective explains change as a change in communication, meaning, and cognitive schema. In fact, the very idea of organizational change is rethought in this perspective. The rhetoric of planned transformational change presents a distorted view of how successful change works. Most practitioners and organizational members recognize that change has multiple parts, some of which may or may not be successful, and that these have multiple meanings for various audiences. The social construction approach is interested in what the change means to people, recognizing that this meaning may shift at various points in time, emphasizing continuous change rather than episodic change. Some argued for a definition of organizational change as shifting conversations, in which people use different language to understand and accomplish change. This approach can explain how, when change does not proceed as expected, certain conversations may have taken place at all, or may have taken place unsuccessfully. The role of the change agent implied by social construction models of change is to facilitate an appropriate environment for these conversations. Creating change does not mean rigidly following the same set of rules through a well defined process, but being creative in how it's achieved. Negotiating among different stakeholders helps produce the dialogues that need to happen for change to succeed. New paradigms are emerging in organizational development that take the social construction philosophy quite seriously. This approach rejects the belief inherent in systems theory that systems are generally alike and general principles can be applied to predict how they'll react and respond. Instead, complex adaptive systems thinking believes that individuals and organizations respond differently depending on the circumstances, so behavior can't be predicted and controlled so systematically. This implies that managing change does not work from a top-down perspective, as in systems theory, but instead, the role of the change agent is to use an understanding of the evolving patterns to design the next intervention. For many observers, this approach resonates because it highlights how changes can adapt and spread throughout a system to illustrate how even small changes made in a single project team can have expansive effects across the organization. Another of these emerging paradigms similarly supports the notion that changes in an organization can be continuous and emergent, and that they're based on the narratives and changing conversations of organizational members. Using multiple models may also help to illustrate new aspects of a situation, since being overly wedded to one particular model may blind the practitioner to important information. What is important is to be conscious of the assumptions of the approach being taken and the consequences of them.